Oh, what's for lunch? What's going on up here in the corner? We got Claudia. What are you making for lunch?
Actually, I'm just unloading the groceries, but as soon as you're done, I'm making pumpkin bread.
Oh, yummy!
Ooh,
Fabulous.
me too.
I'll take
Send
it.
some over.
I'm making it
Take it.
too.
Pumpkin bread.
Yep.
I didn't know. Oops.
Are we putting chocolate chips in this pumpkin bread or no?
No, it's got toasted pumpkin seeds in mine.
Oh,
Yeah.
Really good.
Sounds good.
No, no chocolate chips. No chocolate
That's
chips.
next level. Toasted pumpkin seeds.
Oh, yeah, it's really good.
Speaking of Halloween, did anybody actually have trick-or-treaters on their street?
We didn't. Well, I don't know about on our street, but nobody came to our house.
No, we
Yeah.
did a
We had none
cul-de-sac
either.
at our kid's house. We don't do trick-or-treating on our street.
But I still buy the candy. Guess who eats it?
We bought well, we can't have it in our house, but we bought the bag of candy to take to the cul-de-sac trick-or-treat party at our kid's house.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
Did they observe any precautions though? That's the
They've been
question.
observing, this group of people have been observing precautions since day one. And
Everybody's
they all
coming.
know
Ding
the
dong,
rules
ding
and
dong,
they
ding
Hey,
all,
dong.
Corey.
they all behave.
Good, good. What's going on?
Okay.
I totally just muted Jeff.
Emails.
Jeff, I'm muting you on purpose, Jeff. Yeah. If
Don't
he doesn't
confuse
want
him
to
anymore.
be with us, that's fine. There we
It might
go.
be an important phone call.
It might be an important phone call.
You never
Might be.
know.
Wow, what is this Peg's background over here? It's fancy,
Whose background?
but that's not
It's in
Peg.
Switzerland. It's the walk up to Mindy's house.
Oh, seriously?
That's neat.
Yeah, isn't it beautiful?
That's
That's
gorgeous.
to walk up to her house. I would never leave my house.
Yeah,
I know.
I'd be sitting in the walk up all the time.
Okay. We're going to start in 1 second. We're almost there. Give it another minute and then we'll get started. Okay. Okay. I think, you know what? I think we should just jump right in. Now, all right. Here we go. Wonderful to see everybody. Somebody remind me the topic. What is the title of this get together today? Give me the title. Don't worry, I know the title. Don't worry, I do know the title, but you'll see what I mean.
Epochs of Jewish History.
Yeah, okay, that's the good. But what is the specific for today?
Hasidism and Kabbalah.
Okay, Hasidism, Hasidut, and Kabbalah or Kabbalah. All right, so it's an interesting title because the truth is, the title should actually be flipped. Kabbalah and Hasidut, or Kabbalah and Hasidism, right? Because Hasidism, which we'll get to a little bit later, is not only a response, but the evolution of. It's based on Kabbalah. So, in order to start talking about Hasidut, first, we have to talk about Kabbalah. All right, fair enough? Fair enough. All right. So now I have another question. For you. Bear with me. I promise this is leading somewhere. Okay? I promise this is leading somewhere. Who can tell me? What is this? Merle?
Hummus.
Okay, all right.
Hummus.
Let's just time out for a second, people. We're going to do a little Hebrew lesson first. You didn't think you were coming, this is all right. It's not called hummus, Please don't call it hummus.
Hummus.
Please don't call it hummus. Please don't do that. Please don't. It's hummus. Hummus. There's no us.
Hummus.
Hummus. Here comes Risa. It's hummus. Okay. So please don't say hummus ever again. All right. Thank you. Just don't. All right. So okay. Who thinks, just by a show of hands, that this is hummus? By a show of hands. Hummus. Even, I guess, even if you're not connected, not hummus. Oh, look at you.
Is it tahina? Is it tahina?
Oh, is it tahina? Well, no, it's got, all right. It's not tahina, but I love that you got the chud.
That's it, David.
Okay.
He
What is that?
Yes.
Jody, why are you shaking your head?
Because it's a picture of hummus.
Okay, yes. This is not hummus. This is a picture of hummus. This right behind me is a picture of hummus. It is not hummus. It can never be hummus. It is just not possible for this to be hummus because this is solely a picture of hummus. No matter how much I want this to be hummus, it is not hummus. It can inspire me to think of the hummus or to get closer to this hummus, right? Like I can remember times I was eating the hummus. I can remember like, oh, it reminds me of the flavors of the hummus or when I've experienced the hummus, right? I can remember the smells. I can remember the people I was with when I ate this hummus and whatnot, but this is not hummus, right? Also another timeout. We're gonna do another Hebrew lesson here that's strictly about hummus. I promise we're gonna get somewhere. Risa, don't worry. Okay, I see that look of skepticism in your eye. Another Hebrew lesson. Does anybody know the Hebrew word for towel? What is the Hebrew word for towel? Miriam, you know?
Magevet.
Magevet. Good. Magevet.
Right. That's what I said.
The Hebrew, yes.
From Lenagev. Yeah.
Lenagev, which means to wipe, right? Because we wipe ourselves with the towel like this.
Yeah, and the
right?
Negev, and
So
the Negev is dry.
And the
Negev.
Beautiful. Thank you, Miriam. Yes, and the Negev is dry. So check this out, everybody. The way that you eat hummus, you don't ochel et hummus. Lo ochlim et hummus. That's eat the hummus. No, we get ready. Lenagev et hummus. That's the way you eat hummus because you're supposed to take the pita and you wipe it. Lenagev et hummus. Right? Lenagev. Wipe the hummus. Good. All right. We're back. So this is not hummus. For example, Peg, where did you go? Why do you keep popping in and out of the picture? You're muted. You're muted, Peg.
Hello. My rolling chair was just moving. I don't know why it's going.
Okay, your rolling chair. So what did you say was this right here? Where are you right now? What is this?
My background?
Yeah.
Is Zurich, Switzerland.
No, Peg, it is not.
It looks like Zurich.
It is a picture of. It is not Zurich, Switzerland. You are not there. You are not feeling those flowers. You are not smelling the smells. You're not walking on that ground. That's kind of not nice of me, is it? Because I know that's your children and your grandchildren. I'm sorry, Peg. I'm making an example and I really apologize. That was not nice of me. We'll get back to the hummus. This is not hummus. This never will be hummus. This never can be hummus. But what it can do is it can inspire us to think about the hummus and get close to the hummus as we possibly can without having it. For example, all right, there's another way. Jody, I'm gonna put you on the spot here for a second, please. Are you there, Jody? Okay, Risa.
Might not be there.
Right, Risa, I'm putting you on the spot, Risa. Can you unmute yourself?
I just did.
What was one of your favorite places that you've ever traveled to before?
If I don't say Israel because I lived there, so it's not like traveling, the highlight is Galapagos.
The Galapagos. Okay. let's go. Let's actually use Israel because I think it'll be a little bit easier because I don't know what the native foods of the Galapagos are. Let's use Israel.
Okay.
Have you ever eaten in like a restaurant where it had like really good pita, hummus, and that kind of stuff in Israel?
Yes.
Of course. Okay, and so you really feel like that's the real deal, hummus, the pita, you're eating this, it's amazing. Good, great. Now, back in America, have you ever gone to a restaurant with the hummus and pita?
Yeah, occasionally.
Okay. She's like, yeah, all right. So how did it compare?
It doesn't compare.
It doesn't compare. All right. So it's closer to the real thing than this picture behind me, but
Yes.
it's still not the real thing. But
I was going to come.
it.
I left for a minute and I went to the refrigerator to get hummus and a pizza, but Stanley finished it as a late midnight snack last night.
A late midnight snack?
Very late, he's watching the elections.
Midnight is midnight. Is it early midnight?
No.
Never mind. Never
election
mind.
night,
Okay.
midnight.
So here's what I'm talking about here. The purpose of this nonsense that's actually not really nonsense. This conversation, where's my mouse? Where did it go? Where'd it go? Is the essence of Kabbalah. Is the essence of Kabbalah. And what do I mean by that? All right, check it out. Wait, where'd my mouse go? Sorry, everybody, my mouse is being, oh, here we go, fabulous, it's back. Okay, is the essence of Kabbalah. Hold on, I'm just gonna get rid of this fun background here. I'm in my garage, everybody. Because for Kabbalah, it's the idea, right, of getting as close to the divine as one possibly can, to try and know, get ready for this, the unknowable, to try and know the unknowable, right? So Kabbalah applies, this name Kabbalah applies to all aspects of mystical tradition, of which there are many, right? Kabbalah is like an umbrella. There are many different mystical traditions. And the word Kabbalah can mean received, like likabel, right? Or tradition. So it's the true, those who practice Kabbalah talk about this as being the true way to receive tradition, the true way to receive Judaism, and in one's exploration to connect with the divine, right? If the Shulchan Aruch, or the codes and the mitzvot, like lays out, here is the way that you want, this is how you're supposed to work, is focused on what God wants from us. Get ready for this. Kabbalah, or Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah in specific, is our attempt to explore the essence of God itself, right? God's essence itself. It's this idea of trying to know the unknowable, of trying to get as close to this real deal hummus as possible, right? We eat the real thing in Israel, we come here in America and we eat it and it reminds us, we're like, oh, it's so good, but actually it's not so good. It's not the real thing, but it's one of those things that just produces these memories in us. It can inspire us to want to eat it, right? And it's like the example of absolute zero. Does anybody know what absolute zero is? Does anybody know what absolute, Jeff, what is absolute zero?
Minus 273 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, I'm talking about it in terms of if you were on a graph and you were trying to get to zero, right? You can never get to zero because there's always a number that's greater. Like you could if you're trying to get to zero, you'll never reach zero. You can never reach zero because between 1 and 0, there's an infinite amount of numbers, right? Between the number 1 and 0, if you go back, count down from 1 to 0, there's an infinite amount of numbers, which means you can never get to 0. Never, ever. It's impossible to get to 0 because there's always going to be an infinite amount of numbers in between the 1 and the 0. And that, what, Risa, what?
It's infinitely many. Otherwise, you're using infinite as a number. So that's my math background. I can go with it.
There's infinitely many. Thank you. There's infinitely many numbers. Did I use that correctly? Yes, good. There are infinitely many numbers between 1 and 0, just like there is no way to get from us to God because God is unknowable. There are infinitely many walls or barriers. But Kabbalah is seen as a way, not necessarily the way, but to them it was the way, a way to get as close as possible. But when you think about the infinite, that can drive you bananas, right? It can drive you bananas. Like the rabbis of the Talmud regarded the mystical study of God as important as studying Torah, yet very dangerous. Why? Because of that madness. It can lead a person to madness. Like, if I just go a little farther, maybe, or just a little further, maybe, just a little further, maybe I can. Or it's like a gambler, right? Oh, one more hand and I'm gonna wait, one more hand, I'm gonna win. One more hand, I'm gonna win. No, right? You're never gonna win. You're never gonna get that close. And this would drive people bonkers. Jeff, you have something you'd like to say?
That reference that you just said is reminiscent of the sin of the Tower of Babel, where people felt, build another layer and I can get closer to God. I will achieve godliness or sharing godliness.
Build another level, keep going. And this is why the rabbis of the Talmud said that this studying mysticism was so dangerous, right? So much so that they even legislated it, right? That the only ones who could study it were married men over 40 who were already great Torah and Talmud scholars. If you weren't that, don't even think about it. Because if you did, your brain would turn to mush, to noodles, right? That's it. Totally bake your noodle. So, Kabbalah is an attempt, it is a way to know the unknowable with the understanding that you will never get all the way there, right? It's almost as if once you accept that, you can keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing and keep, like the quantum realm, right? Just keep going and keep going, smaller, smaller, smaller. All right. Any questions so far?
I have a question.
Yes, Miriam, go.
Can that also describe Judaism? Not the Kabbalah particularly, but the whole idea of it being a journey. And we never, ever get to the top. The ladder continues and continues and continues. And knowing we will not get to the top is okay too. We don't necessarily, there's this expression, oh Lord, help me seek the truth, which is already not Jewish. Help me seek the truth, but save me from those who have found it. So
save me from those who have found it.
Right.
Yeah. And you know what? That's really interesting that you say that. Because we're going to see that later towards the end of our discussion in the difference between something called the Hasidim and the Mitnagdim. Okay, the Hasidim and the Mitnagdim, which is very interesting. So it's like these streams of thought, which is very interesting because the Mitnagdim, they get their name as a reaction to the Hasidim, because mitnadeg, right? Neged means against. But we'll get there. Miriam, thank you very much. It's a fabulous point. Roy wrote a very interesting question in the chat. where he said, when was the concept of Ein Sof first articulated? Great question, and we're going to actually hit on that. Ein Sof, meaning without end, without end. Another name for God being there is no end and there is no beginning, right? Not even just without end, but no beginning either. It just is, right? And that idea is then going to permeate into Hasidut, right? It's going to permeate into Hasidut, but we'll get there in a second. Go, Jeff, you got another question.
In thinking about what you've said so far, and I didn't get to the beginning.
That's dangerous.
The difficulty with this Kabbalah is that it aggrandizes the actions of the individual and isolates the individual within his own mind and spirit. And everything else in Judaism requires action. This takes Judaism away from the actions that we cherish, the mitzvahs, the loving kindness, the chesed. It defines the religion in terms of your own personal mental approach to getting closer to righteousness and God.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. Yeah, go on. Yet it can what?
Yet it isolates the society to individuals not interacting as the mitzvahs and the sociologic treatise of the Torah would dictate. It doesn't stress that.
So that's okay. Well, that's a very good point. What was one of the words that you used? Kindness. How did you define that? Or how did you translate that?
In my mind, it's the essence of interaction.
No. You translated it into Hebrew. What was the word that you used?
Chesed.
Chesed. Thank you, Miriam. Yeah. What does that sound like?
Hasidic.
Hasidim. Chesed. So we're going to get there. So the point that you just made, Jeff, that was one of the reasons that, okay, but we're going to get there. So you're absolutely right. This is all about being inside your own head. And this is why people freaked out from studying it, but we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Let's first talk about something more specific, right? And one of the most famous books of Kabbalah, one of the most famous works, because it was multiple books. Does anybody know? It's called the...
I think it's called the Zohar.
You are absolutely correct, Miriam. The Zohar, or radiance, right? To illuminate, sort of like the radiance behind Jeff's head from the mirror and the light, right? Everybody sees that. And even Risa has the fabulous light behind her. Look at that. Claudia has the fabulous light behind her and everything like that. Look at that. See? It's right, the radiance, right? It's like Moses coming down the mountain. With the karnaim, the rays of light, not the horns, the rays of light. So this is very interesting. The Zohar, it's basically, all of this is, we're looking at it from up here rather than really getting into the weeds. It's mystical commentary on the 5 books of Moses, right? And it's discussions, multiple discussions, like the nature of God, the origin and structure of the universe, the nature of souls, sin, redemption, good and evil, and so on, right? And here's this is an interesting point. So it is written in medieval Aramaic and some medieval Hebrew. Okay, so it's this, and this is very important. Medieval Aramaic and medieval Hebrew, it's language of the 2nd century, like from the land of Israel, Palestine area, 2nd century. And it is attributed, the Zohar, get ready for this, to a rabbi of that time, the 2nd century, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai of the 2nd century. Right? It's saying that, so during this time, he hid in a cave for 13 years, being persecuted by the Romans, and he hid in a cave for 13 years, and it inspired or illuminated by God to write these piece of works. However, it was not written in the 2nd century. It was actually, it first appears in the 13th century. 13th century, right? In Spain area, and it is fully attributed to somebody by the name of Moshe de Leon, okay? That he wrote this, that he wrote all of this, and people say that he actually wrote most of it, but he was out there sharing it with everybody, and he was saying that it was written by this guy a long time ago, right? So why do you think, here's my question, why do you think he would attribute this to someone else, even though he wrote it? Why wouldn't he want all the glory? It's like reverse plagiarism. Why would he do that? Why would it? Susan, why do you think he would do that? Susan Ehrlich, go ahead, unmute yourself. You're talking, but you're muted. Unmute yourself.
He
There it
gained
is.
stature.
Go.
Sorry, he gained stature by having, and credibility by having it attributed to an earlier sage.
Beautiful. Yes. To gain stature, like to make it, give it gravitas, or somebody who wrote it in the 2nd century, Talmudic times and everything like that. Then, this must be really important. This must be really important, right? And then over time, what's very interesting, thank you, Susan, yes. Then over time, it slowly became attributed that, yes, it was passed first to Shimon ben Yochai, and then Shimon ben Yochai, the spirit of Shimon ben Yochai, then passed it on to Moshe de Leon, right? Moshe de Leon. So, so the way that they talked about, okay, get ready for this. The way that that people eventually talked about this book, or these books, the Zohar, right? It's the same way that, all right, we have the body, right? Then first we have the clothes cover the body, and then the body then is the vessel for the soul, right? The body is then the vessel for the soul. So they say, like, in relationship to Torah. So the Torah text itself, right? The Torah itself is not the soul of the Jewish people, it's the body. The Torah is not the soul, and this is this is not me saying yes, definitively that's the case. I'm just sharing with you what the scholar, the mystics would say. The Torah is just the body, but the true soul, what's really inside of it, is the Zohar. It's the interpretation that everything. Now, this is the very interesting part. Everything that's written in the Torah, right, means something completely different than what it actually says. You don't take the words for face value. Everything written in the Torah actually means something else. Everything in the Torah actually means something else. Every word does not mean the word that you see on the page. It means something completely different. And that meaning is hidden, completely hidden. But in order to access those words in the study of mysticism, right, there's a formula that they put forth. Has anybody ever heard the word pardes before? Yes. Pardes.
Yeah.
Who said yes? Who said yes?
I did.
Merle, what is pardes? What is a pardes? Does anybody know what a pardes is?
Isn't it learning?
It's an art.
Isn't that why we call our day schools pardes?
Oh, why you call your Jewish day school pardes? Okay, pardes is an orchard.
I think it's a grove, like an orange grove.
Yes, thank you, Miriam. Like a grove, an orchard. Okay.
Right.
It is also, okay, get ready. Now this is really
Paradise.
beautiful.
Paradise.
Thank Miriam, yes. Not only just an orchard, but another word for paradise, right? Another word for paradise. It is, so paradise is also an acronym of the way one should study Torah and Zohar, really, the way that one studies the mystical text in Kabbalah. Pardes. Okay, get ready. This is how you access paradise. Pardes. First is the pshat. Pshat is the literal meaning of the text. The literal meaning. God said, let there be light. Literally, God said, let there be. Okay, that's the literal meaning. Okay, pshat, literal meaning. Then something called the remez. It's the allusions that one can make from the words. What does this allude to, right? What is the allusions? Then from there, the next level is the drash, right? You've heard of this word drash, that somebody's going to tell the story. It's the analogies, right? It's the, I'm going to make analogies of the text and how I'm going to try and relate it to something else. And then finally, pardes, this is the sod, right? The sod. It's the secrets. Yes, the foundations and the secrets. It's the mystical secrets that everything you see actually means something else, right? Everything that you see is not what you see is not real. It actually is the veil of the truth, of the real light. Okay, and now in this, and this is to answer to Roy's question. It is in the Zohar, right, that God is known as Ein Sof, infinite, no beginning, no end. It's everything. And again, we cannot, and that cannot be comprehended by humans. We cannot comprehend the idea of no end and no beginning because of our end and our beginnings, right? That we are part of that we have an end and we have a beginning. But, right, we can try and understand and describe God as revealed in something else, right? The way that so for example, if we're using that line, right, that curve to trying to get to absolute zero, and you said there's an infinite many numbers. Did I use that right, Risa? Infinite, right? There is a way, infinitely, thank you, infinitely, right? So so the Zohar and Kabbalah doesn't just leave us hanging with this idea. They actually offer, here is a pathway that you can follow, right? To get as close as one possibly can. And it's going to take a lifetime, and you may not even get there. And it's not linear. It's going to be, possibly 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps, 3 steps back, 5 steps forward, 10 steps back. It's going to go, right? And you're going to constantly move through the realms. But it's in something known as the 10 sfirot, the 10 mystical attributes. All right, now we're gonna go over this, and I think that you may have heard about this before. I just want to be conscious of the time. We'll try and just run through this pretty quickly. I'm gonna share my screen. Get ready. I want to show something to you. Boom. All right. Does everybody see this? This is known as oh, you don't see this?
No, I don't. There we go.
Does anybody?
Now it's there.
Can you give me a thumbs up if you see this this thing that looks like I don't know, atom, molecules? Good, fabulous, wonderful. Oh, before we continue, let me just ask if there are any questions. I just want to make sure are there any questions before we keep going with this? Has anybody ever seen this before, this picture?
Yes.
Risa, you never seen this?
Never.
לא נכון.
כן, נכון.
לא מאמין
לא
בך.
ראיתי את זה.
I don't believe you. All right. So this is known as the 10 sfirot. Does anybody recognize, okay, does anybody recognize any interesting words on here? Does anybody recognize any words on here? Risa?
Chesed.
Chesed.
Okay, Jeff says chesed.
All of them.
Shechina.
Shechina, what is the Shechina? What is the Shechina?
Soul.
The feminine aspect of God.
Fabulous. Okay, the feminine aspect of God. Let's go with that for right now. Good. We have the word. Do you see my my mouse on here, or is it just me?
Yes,
You see
cursor.
it? Oh, yay for
You're
all
on
of us.
Chesed.
Fabulous. I am on Chesed, this idea of kindness. Okay, Keter, this is crown. All right, here we go. We're going to go through what this is all about. This is the way.
In counting the Omer?
What?
Is this not reflective of counting the Omer?
I don't know, but this is strictly what the path one takes in getting to as close to God as possible, as prescribed by Kabbalah and in the Zohar. Okay, first we have Keter. This is the divine crown. Okay, this is wait, let me see. No, you know what? I'm going to back up for a second. All right, first let's look at the right side, right? The right side here. The right side of this structure, right? It's 9 all connected with the 10th Shekhinah down below, which we'll talk about in a second why. The right side represents the principles of unity, harmony, and benevolence as embodied in the Sphira Chesed. So the main thing that holds all of the right side together is Chesed, or this idea of kindness, right? Goodness and kindness, right? Okay. The left side of the structure represents the side of power and strict justice, the values embodied in the Sphira of Deen, right? Deen, meaning justice, law, right? And now the middle column represents the ideal balance between divine mercy and justice, right? And this harmony is best represented in the Sphira of Tiferet, splendor, right? This idea. All right. So it exists between, Tiferet exists in between the Deen and Chesed as a way of finding the balance, right? Because Kabbalah recognizes that the universe could not survive, right, solely upon mercy or solely upon justice, that the two need to be one and connected through splendor, Tiferet. All right, now we're going to just quickly define all 9 of these and then the 10th as well. Okay, Keter. This is the divine, the divine crown. Keter is the uppermost aspect of the Sfirot, and it's the uppermost aspect that can be contemplated by humans. Okay, next we have Chokhmah. Chokhmah, or wisdom.
Wisdom.
Right here, yes. It represents the contemplative, synthetic aspects of God's thought. This is God in contemplation. Binah, over here now, we have understanding. Binah refers to the analytic, distinguishing aspects of God's thought, right? The analytic. Now, boom, we're over here. Chesed, loving kindness, compassion. It represents the generous, benevolent side of God. Now, here we go over here. Deen, judgment, power. This Sphira represents the fearsome powers of divine punishment and wrath in the world, right? This power is needed to maintain control over the universe. Now, here we go. Tiferet, glory, beauty, splendor. It represents the ideal balance of justice and mercy needed to properly run the universe, right? It unites, this is the one that unites all of the upper 9, including itself, right? All right, now we go to Netzach. Netzach, Netzach, Netzachim. Right?
Eternity.
This represents God's activity. It means eternity, first of all. It means eternity. And represents, get ready for this. The Netzach represents God's active grace in the world. Not necessarily God actively working in the world, but God's active grace in the world. Then we have Hod, or glory. Glory. This represents the lowest channels through which God's judgment comes down to the world. Right? It's also very much associated with power, the power of prophecy. Right? This is how the judgment comes down into the world. If you don't do this, if you don't change your ways, God's wrath will come upon you. Right? This is where the prophets, they were very much connected with Hod in the aspect, in the way that this is described. Then, okay, get ready for this. Yisod is, or foundation, right? Keren HaYesod, right? It's the channel, get ready for this. This is the channel through which Tiferet strives to unite, okay? Get ready for this. This is why Shekhinah is not connected. Yisod is the channel through which Tiferet strives to unite the Shekhinah and pass on the creative and benevolent divine forces. It is through the Yisod, right? If Tiferet is connecting all of this thing of God, it is through Yisod. It is through Yisod, right? And this is us actively engaging with all of these things that tries to connect us with Shekhinah. And Shekhinah is God's presence in the world. Anytime that we say we feel God's presence in the world, the Kabbalists are saying what you are experiencing is the Shekhinah, okay? It's the Talmudic concept representing God's dwelling and immanence in the created world, right? It's the personification, right? It's the personification of the people of Israel's relationship to God. And it is through the Shekhinah, it is only through the Shekhinah that humans can experience the divine. Everything else is unattainable, though you can still try and know as much of it. But there's the furthest you can go, in even understanding is in one's connection through the Shekhinah. Okay, so now we're going to fast forward. Ooh, my God. Okay, we're going to fast forward a little bit. Now, you have all heard, I'm sure, right? Within a few hundred years of this, right now, we're getting into the 16th and the end of the 16th and the beginning of the 17th century, right? Where now people are seeing a change. This is so like Jeff, like you said, this was so individual and so esoteric, and so very few people were even engaged in this, right? And those who really were engaged, they weren't engaged with anybody else, right? But that's when things started to change and evolve. Have you heard of, okay, let me stop my share right here. You've heard of the term tikkun olam. Have you heard of this term, right? Ever heard this word tikkun olam, these words tikkun olam? All right. So the way that we use it, especially in the progressive movements, the reform movement, is not exactly the way that it was intended when it was first, the ideas first kind of came into being. It's through Yitzchak Luria, or also known as the Ari, right? The lion, the divine lion. He came up with this idea of the kelim, where God, in order to create, right? If God is the Ein Sof, there's no beginning and no end, but God still wants to create. How is God actually going to create? Where is the room for God to actually create?
Us.
And that comes, what's that?
Through us.
Okay, but where did we come from? And even to create, how are we created?
By shrinking himself and making room.
Okay, so tzimtzum. Risa, you've heard of this.
Yes.
Tzimtzum, right? This idea of kind of taking a breath in and shrinking oneself, making space for something else, making space for others. And in this sense, suspending the selfness, the aim selfness of God to create this vacuum where then God can create. And in doing so, that light of God that was needed to the tzimtzuming, the vacuum that God had to create, that light had to go somewhere. And the light went into these vessels. But the vessels were not strong enough to contain the light. Duh, what's going to be strong enough to contain the light if that light is God? Nothing. And the vessels shattered, right? And tikkun olam is the idea of repairing the vessels, our responsibility to repair the vessels, to still maintain that light of God, right? To kind of bring it back for us to experience. This is the way that we're going to experience the light of God is through the repair of these vessels and a place for us to store the vessels within us, right? Okay, so now, and only now can we move on to Hasidut or Hasidism, okay? Because it was during this time, in the 17th century, right, in Eastern Europe. So all of this other stuff had started in Spain. Like I know you guys took the course, or you friends took the course, y'all took the course, or the class, the Golden Age of Spain, and all of these things, right? Like, so this kind of stuff was also the Golden Age of Spain. This Zohar, right, coming out of there. But here we have somebody else who says, okay, this guy says, and Jeff alluded to this. Nah. This is not just for the highfalutin, right? The people over the board. Everybody should have the access or the opportunity to access and create a relationship with the divine, right? As deep as one possibly can. And this guy's name, right, who started this movement, so Hasidut, of kindness, it also means piety, okay? His name was Israel ben Eliezer. Israel ben Eliezer, also known as, get ready, this name you may have heard, the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov. Yisra, the best, right? That's the acronym for Baal Shem Tov, right? It's the one with the good name, right? The Baal, not leader, the main man, with the master of the good name. And what is the good name, the Baal Shem Tov? It's the real name. It's the name that God knows us by, right? It's the name that God knows us by. It has no pronunciation. It is the name that we create for ourselves, and that's the name that God knows us by. That's for a whole nother class. Okay, get ready for this stuff now. So, who is it? Who is it? All right.
Spam.
So he was devoted to this idea of Torah, the outer aspects of Torah, but even more so the inner aspects of Torah, right? That it wasn't veering from a commitment of Torah, but rather, right, it was trying to unearth or to move away the veil and use the hidden to create a closer relationship, right? And here's the thing, it was in contrast to some of the more intellectual styles of mainstream Jewish leaders of the day, right? They emphasized the primarily Torah study. But the Baal Shem Tov, he emphasized going beyond the inner dimensions, right? The inner dimensions. And in doing so, making room for the Mashiach, or the making way for the Messiah. Okay, so now this is the kind of stuff that people were getting a little uncomfortable with, right? He said, I'm going to make these ideas open to the most simplest Jew, right? It doesn't mean that the study is going to be simple, but that everybody is going to have the opportunity, right? Outwardly, he was giving new emphasis, right? Still inwardly, he's giving this individual pathway through the Sfirot. But like Jeff said before, outwardly, now it's about community and connection, right? Outwardly, the way that you get to that inner opportunity is through prayer and acts of kindness in the community, right? It's prayer and acts of kindness. And joy, the joy of prayer, the joy of acts of kindness, the joy of knowing that God is one, which means that you are part of everything, that we are all part of it, and there should be infinite joy in that idea, right? So Hasidut was about this idea of joy in everything that you do, joy in prayer, joy in kindness, joy. It leads, because the joy is what's going to lead to the veils to be removed. Jeff, you have a question.
Instead of only the elite and knowledgeable being able to see the sunshine is now open to everyone to see, that it's within reach, and that the light of Torah learning is capable of being appreciated on every level by everyone, instead of the intelligentsia only.
Correct. Not only is it available, it should be, and it needs to be available. Why? Because only that true availability to every single Jew will bring the coming of the Messiah. Now, all right, but now here's the parts that it gets a little tricky. Okay. So there's this schism developing between the followers of these ideas, right? Because here's something else that the Baal Shem Tov really focused on, that you find the teacher and everything is about the teacher. What the teacher says goes. This is your teacher. The teacher knows. The teacher is on par with the angels, the angelic court, right? Like Schneerson, they looked to their and they called the Rebbe, their own Rebbes, right? Not just their Rebbe. They were on par. This was their access to God, was through the teachings of the Rebbe. You find this Rebbe, and whatever the Rebbe says, there is no questioning of the Rebbe. What the Rebbe says goes, right? So these schools were started. They find the Rebbe. So this is where the schism starts to get. They have and you get the idea of Hasidim, there are many groups now, right? It's not just one. Hasidim is not just one group. Within the group, there's 10, 12, 20, I don't know, so many, each having their own Rebbe. And they don't all get along, because each of the Rebbe, you follow the Rebbe. But if you're going to look at it as a group, Hasidim, the other side was the Mitnagdim. These were the traditional followers, and the Mitnagdim, meaning their name came about, Neged, Mitnagdim, against these Hasidim. Why? Because they didn't. First of all, they were straying away from serious Torah scholarly study, right? Let's let this dancing and the joy and the stuff. No, kind of sounds familiar, right? So it's almost like the Hasidim were the first Reformed Jews, right? Hasidim, the first Reformed Jews, and here's where they got really scared. They were worried about this idea of the Rebbe, and people looking at this Rebbe as the false Messiah, because what had just happened at this time, right before, you have Shabtai Tzvi, right, who was this false Messiah that people followed, and all the cuckoo-ness that happened from this. and the separation in the community. So they were like, this sounds a little too much like what that is, right? Sounds a little too much. Take it easy. And those differences, right? Those differences still exist today, right? Those differences still exist today. In Israel, you have the Minadim and the Hasidim, and within the Hasidim, right, you have the Lubavitch, you've heard of this before, or you have the Bobov, or you have the Satmars, right, the Belzers, right? These are all towns, names of towns that where these Rebbes that they follow came from. So even within there, you're going to have to find the way their outfits. They can tell the difference between them. I might not be able to tell the difference between a Belzer or a Satmar or a Ger or whatever. They could tell the difference between each other by the way they wear their outfits, right? So if we're going to look at it from like 10,000 feet from Hasidut, it was a response to how one brings Kabbalah to the masses of Jews, right? And again, that could sound a little sketchy because where do you draw the line when we talk about the Kabbalah Center, right? The Kabbalah Center, that's not Kabbalah according to Zohar, Kabbalah, right? But the idea of bringing these gateways to the masses, right? That's where you can see things can get a little dicey, right? But still, even within our own practice, there is the elements of mysticism, right? For example, we talked about Tikkun Olam and this idea of the shards and the lights. There's also, right, because we didn't even talk about this. Where was the movement of Kabbalah? Starting in Spain, Eastern Europe, and then into Sfat in Israel. These is like the main center of mystical tradition in Israel. And one of the most famous like Kabbalistic poems, we actually read every Friday night. Does anybody know which one I'm referring to?
Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi, yes, Lecha Dodi. So even there, and Lecha Dodi is talking about this relationship between the bride and the groom and the people Israel and God, the Shekhinah, here we are, right? Bringing it right back in. The only way that we get to fully know, or as far as a human can comprehend one's relationship with God, through the Shekhinah, coming down through all of those aspects of the Zohar. Man. Okay, there's another very interesting. So even the term Orthodox, right? So Hasidim are differentiated from other Orthodox Jews, right? And it comes down to, again, not just the Mitnagdim, but all Orthodox Jewry, because of their devotion to the dynastic Rebbe, right? The name of the different schools. But this, we can relate to this as well, right? Because Reformed, right, the name Orthodox Jew, when did that come about? It only came about after, Risa, what are you going to say?
Enlightenment.
Say it. Okay, and why? What other movement?
Reform start.
Reform. It was against the opposite of the Reform.
Yes, exactly. So it's the same way like Mitnagdim, their name really means against business. The Orthodox, that name was created as a reaction to Reform Judaism, the creation of Reform Judaism and Reform theology and thought, right? Before that, we're Jews, we're traditional Jews, we're Jews. Not Orthodox, conservative, Reform, that wasn't a thing, right? So you see, all of this is a constant evolution. We had this even way back in the day with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Essenes, right? Everybody coming up with their names to describe who they were. We are no different today than they was back then. It's just the evolution of who we are as a people, which is absolutely beautiful. Okay. Unfortunately, we're already over time. I'm sorry to tell you that, but this is fabulous. And again, this is really just a little bit of taste. This is just a taste. This is just taste. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send out, if you're interested, I'm going to have an email sent out, as a follow-up, some different interesting books to read if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this stuff. Right. This was some of the greatest stuff that I learned in rabbinical schools. A wonderful teacher. Here's the thing. I understood nothing that my teachers ever said about Zohar and mysticism, Kabbalah. But thankfully, I don't know if any of you know Rabbi Josie Hudson. Do you know Rabbi Josie Hudson? She's at Temple Israel
on Hollywood.
Yeah, Temple. So she's a very close friend of my family, and we were in school together. I would not have passed any of these courses without her because she's so patient. It wasn't like I was cheating. No, Jeff, don't laugh at me. I wasn't like looking overhead her stuff, but we were in a study group and she was so patient and was able to explain all these things to me so clearly and patiently. And it was just so beautiful. One of my best teachers ever. So, I'm very thankful for her. So the books that we read together, I can share in an email if you're interested. I'll send it out anyway. Anyway, wonderful to see everybody. I see some of these familiar faces that I guess I'm going to see on Friday also because we're going to be together. We're going to be together for a Torah study. I'm going to be doing Torah study then, and I'll see you then. Risa, thank you. You guys are awesome. Wonderful to see everybody.
You so much.
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Always a joy. Always a joy.